broadly on the role of community livelihoods in a community setting. But now, or a group setting. But now we will going to discuss more in detail, looking at the important role of micro, small, and medium size enterprises. Uh, it's enabling systems and partnerships that could allow its sustainable operations. So this is Spotlight 4, and I welcome every one of you. We are being joined by a set of experts from the government, from development partners, think tank, financial institutions. So we will listen to them as they present their experiences, initiatives, and we know how important MSM is in the region. It is the backbone of our economy. Majority of workforce is employed through these MSMEs. However, these MSMEs are usually relying on climate-sensitive sectors such as agriculture, forestry, and tourism. So climate shocks makes them unfortunately faced with revenue losses, business disruptions, and it requires costs for rebuilding their operations, maintaining back their supply chains. On the other hand, while we see MSMEs as vulnerable to climate shocks, we also see them as innovators. We see them as someone who, or something that who can provide services, products that could help increase resilience of the communities. And as such, strengthening their resilience requires robust national systems and public-private partnerships that provide climate-responsive finance, coordinated preparedness, and stable market environments. As I've mentioned, in this session, we will be joined by our respectful speakers from Fiji, Lao, PDR, Indonesia, sharing their experiences on implementing initiatives related to strengthening MSME's resilience. And on the second part, we are being joined by our experts from the Asian Development Bank and the Asian Disaster Preparedness Center, where they will try to detail out more on the exchanges based on the experience presented by our speakers from the first part. And we will also open the last part for questions from our participants joining here for any burning questions and some clarifications. We will request our speakers to be on front. So at this juncture, let's proceed to the first part of our session. I'll request Ms. Senkeo Futavong, the Deputy Director General from the Ministry of Industry and Commerce of the Lao People's Democratic Republic, to present their case. Ms. Senkeo, over to you.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I'm great to be here today. First of all, I would like to thank to the ADB to invited me to join this forum. This is my first time to join the CRPP forum. Yeah. Recently, the Ministry of Industry and Commerce, we had got the project from the ADB that we call Sustainable Agri-Food System Sector Project, or we call SASSP. The some source of fund is from the CRPP investment fund. So, but the project not implementing yet. It is instead of the initial, instead of the preparing the project, and we hope to launch the project soon. So today I have not the lesson learned, the specific lesson learned from the project to share with you, but I would like to share what does the project design on supporting the MSME. And nevertheless, I also would like to learn from other project or other country that they implementing like this project. Because of the project is related to the micro and small enterprise, so I just would like to show with you the structure of the MSME in Laos. As the moderator said that the MSME is like a backbone of the economic. In Laos is also the MSME is cover 99.8%, and the micro is 94.2%, and the small is 4.9%, and the medium is 0.7%. Legislation on the MSME promotion, we have like a law on MSME promotion, the degree on MSME qualification, and the degree on the MSME promotion fund that we are support the financial for the MSME and the technical support to them. And we have the MSME development plan of 5 year for each experience. Yeah. And coming to the project, the substance agriculture agri-food system sector project is aimed to improve climate resilient food security and nutrition and income of the vulnerable household and community, and strengthen the agri-food system that we want to like to add higher value for the commodity. The project is we have the 4 outputs. The first one is for the smallholder access to finance, the technical and nutrition service improve in a climate resilient manner. The second output is agricultural enterprises value chain strengthened in a climate resilient manner. And the third one is the small scale climate resilient infrastructure developed in the support of the target value chains. And the fourth one is the accreditation of the food safety laboratory facilitate. So the partnership between the public institution and private sector that in this project, as I mentioned, we have like a MSME law and the degree on PPT on private public sector. And the rule of the mechanism for this PPT is we have in Laos we have the Lao Business Forum, or we call LBF, which provide a platform for the MSME to raise the issue that direct to the government. And the project used the existing the EPEC institution like Lao access to finance funds, or we call LAF, is under Bank of Lao PDR. And the MSME promotion fund is under Ministry of Industry and Commerce. And we use umbrella is like a Lao Coffee Association and International Center for Topical to support the technical for the smallholder. How the climate and digital information better integrated into the enterprise. For this project, we will reduce the rendering list compact climate data into like a impact. We see that like a raw material to support the lender or maybe processor, and promoting the site-specific climate resilient agriculture, and build the capacity for render is like attending to the bank or the MFI or in at the value chain, the credit product and the climate safeguard. because of the time limits, maybe we can discuss after our discussion. If you interested for more detail on the project, yeah. Thank you very much for your uh, um, for your attention. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Senko, for that brief presentation on providing us context on MSMEs in Lao. I think what is critical from her presentation is the presence of this policy and regulatory framework that enables MSMEs promotion to flourish. And at the same time, the dialogue itself provides a good platform to promote partnerships and create a space where MSMEs can be heard. So moving to our second presentation, I'll kindly request Ms. Nanise Sowani, who's a consultant from the Fiji Development Bank, to present her experience on working on a specific initiative in Fiji.
Okay, good morning all. I am Nani Sesawani and I represent Excelsior Global Hub, an MSME women-led organization in Fiji. I am also an OHSC consultant. So I'm gonna start with my solution. When Cyclone Winston in 2016, when it hit Fiji, it swallowed 31% of Fiji's GDP in hours. Our women market vendors who drive half of our informal sector were the hardest hit. These women are the backbone of our economy, but they can only survive 2 to 3 weeks without daily income before falling into permanent debt. I'm here to introduce the Solesolevaki Resilience Bridge, a 72-hour shield for the women who keep Fiji running. The current parametric insurance is a breakthrough, but for a vendor, 14 days is an eternity. Most market stalls are forced to close forever, just 7 days, or zero cash flow. We are closing this reality gap. Our mission is to evolve the proven 2-week payout into a 72-hour survival trigger, ensuring that when the storm stops, the business doesn't. We aren't just sending a payout, we are building a synchronized 3-layer engine for continuity. Layer 1, as you can see, is the instant parametric relief for survival. It's a proof of concept been introduced by PCAP, that is under UNCDF. Layer 2 would be the pre-linked recovery credit to restock inventory. And layer 3 is specialized OHS and climate risk training to future-proof every stall. Our process is designed for speed and simplicity. A weather event triggers an automated mobile wallets payout within 72 hours. This is immediately followed by pre-linked Fiji Development Bank's recovery credit, a combination proven to drive 87% faster businesses restart. We then bundle this with Excelsior Global Hub's capacity building to turn disaster recovery into professional growth. We aren't starting from scratch. We are building on the proven success of PCAP, which has already reached over 2,000 Fijians with 308,000 Fiji dollars in payouts. While the current system covers 12% of the need, the Solisolivaki Bridge provides the specialized scale needed to protect the most vulnerable women-led businesses. The opportunity for impact is massive. Currently, 29,000 MSMEs in Fiji remain uncovered. Our roadmap is clear. We are scaling from the initial 2,000 reached by PCAP to 5,000 women-led MSMEs in year one, eventually creating a safety net for all 29,000 vendors nationwide. We scale through a 4-level partnership ecosystem. We work from the ground up with women's community groups, align nationally with the Reserve Bank of Fiji and Fiji Development Bank, and connect with regional climate networks like CRPP to ensure this model is built to last. This is bigger than Fiji. The Solisolivaki Bridge is a SIDS replication model designed for any island nation facing climate threats. It is fully aligned with the Fiji's National Adaptation Plan and the Climate Change Act, turning national policy into local life-changing action. To bridge this gap, we are seeking to scale capital and a CRPP partnership to fund our year one pilot project. This investment isn't just for insurance, it is for the financial literacy, OHS safety, and climate resilience of thousands of entrepreneurs in Fiji. We are turning climate vulnerability into unstoppable economic momentum. By investing into the Solisolivaki Resilience Bridge, you are investing in the zero closure future of Fiji's women. Let's build this bridge together. Thank you.
So I think our presentations are quite fast, but if we have any questions later, we can always ask from our speakers. So in what Ms. Nanise has presented, I think it is. I'm not sure if other countries has the same or concept on moving from 14 days now to 72 hours. So from 14 days now, it becomes 3 days for the cash payout. So I would like to hear from other countries later during the discussion their own experience in doing such in case a disaster struck. And then also, I think we see the essential or importance of having a digital infrastructure in carrying out such kind of solutions. Because from 14 days now to 3 days, so obviously digital infrastructure is very critical. And the layering approach as solutions to help our MSMEs from parametric recovery to capacity building. It's a complete package, including the partnership approach and the gender elements in the design. and the ask of support from CRPP, we will explore that within the team. Moving on to our third presentation, I'll request Mr. Insan Seyafat from Pisagro to present more. Yesterday, during the Solutions Hub, one of the solutions, he already presented that, Mr. Insan. But for today, in this presentation, he'll explain more the details and by providing a specific example. So I'll request Mr. Insan.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez. Saudi Hap, good morning, selamat pagi. Thank you so much for the organizer for inviting us here. As Sugar mentioned, I was yesterday presenting the same thing essentially during the Adaptation Solution Hub. So for those who were there, thank you so much. You'll be hearing the same thing, probably more. But for those who aren't, I'm going to present some few slides about what we're doing to help support MSMEs. But because Peace Agro is focusing on the agriculture and cooperative and farmer, so MSMEs for us is limited to the developments of the group of farmer and then become cooperative and then MSMEs, right? So I'll start with my presentation. How do I? Oh, yes. There you go. A bit of advertisement. So Peace Agro, the Partnership for Indonesia Sustainable Agriculture, is an alliance, an associations of private sector. Think of it as a chamber of commerce and industry in your country. But this is focused on agriculture. So we are a group of private sector corporates from the multinational level, mid-size to startups. Welcome. Our focus is to help increase the welfare of the farmer, smallholders who are very much essential in the Indonesian agricultural sector. I think as much as many other ASEAN countries who are present here, we are very much dominated by the farmer. In Indonesia, just to share a bit with you, our, for instance, our coffee sector is, the landscape is 99% of them are farmer, as well as coffee. For cocoa, it's probably 95%. Coffee, paddies, corn, probably 93%. Palm oil is different because it is one of the biggest commodities in Indonesia. So the presence is 50% of smallholder farmer and 50% is private sector. So we see this as a challenge, but also an opportunity. In a simple way, if you want to increase the sector, then we should help the farmer. These are a bit of what we're doing. We have 16 working groups. 11 of them are commodity-based, as you can see on the screen. 5 of them are cross-issues based. So we talk specifically about women empowerment in one working group. We have technology working group, and so on and so forth. Those are our members, brands. You might have seen and recognized some of them, or probably most of them. Moving on. So what we're doing essentially to help MSMEs, cooperative, group of farmer. At Peace Agro, at the core of our business is the inclusive closed-loop model, as you can see on the screen. This is no stranger. This is not new approach. It is essentially a multi-stakeholder approach. Most of us here have been part of it. Most of us here have been implementing multi-stakeholders approach. But at Peace Agro, we call them the inclusive closed-loop model because it's essentially led by private sector. And how it starts, it's with a commercial transaction with this group of farmers. So once their transaction happens, it's easier for private sector or corporate or us as Pisagro to provide the many accesses that this farmer needs. So inclusive closed loop model puts farmer at the heart of it. And at Pisagro, we help connect these farmer with many accesses. So access to market, access to technology, access to um, finance, and all. We are connecting all the members. We are connecting all the partners to essentially create inclusive business environment for farmer. So this is a long term. We're not treating a farmer or group of farmer or cooperative or the MSMEs as beneficiaries. We rather treat them as a business partner. So that would create a win-win solution, creating shared value for everyone, right? I can go more details about it, but I have I think at least 2-3 minutes more. This is the dashboard. This is how we measure the increase, the welfare of the farmer. We focus on three things: growth, resilience, and sustainability. Growth talks about productivity, talks about income, talks about productive lands. Resilience talks about access of health, access of educations, access of internets for those who are sitting in secluded areas. And sustainability, we focus on the environmental sustainability, waste, water, and of course, conservations, protections of the forest. So it is essentially helping the economy, social, and reduce impact on the environment. I have just 1 minute to share with you one of the best cases of these implementations of the inclusive closed loop model. It is with our palm oil working groups, which implements what they call replanting or rejuvenation project. So it focuses on intensifications on the existing lands rather than just opening up more lands and exploitation. As you can see on the slides, there have been proved on before and after these partnerships. The productivity increase, automatically income would increase, certifications from no certification to have more certification, seedlings from non-certified, low quality to now have, use high quality seeds, which help 50% increase of the productivity, and so on and so forth, as you can see on the screen. I'll pause here to have more discussions with you all. Thank you so much. I'll give it back to Sugar.
Thanks, Ms. Renzan. And from your presentation, I think what is also critical is to see our smallholder farmers as an active agents rather than as a beneficiaries alone. So they see the potentials, the benefits of being involved actively in this area. And your role being an intermediary to help facilitate access to various resources that, as we know, many of our MSMEs have limited access and capacity to do such. Um, at this point, maybe we will open the discussion and QA later, but we will have our discussants invited in the stage to flesh out more based on the presentations made from the government, from the financial institution, and Pisagro acting as a chamber of commerce. Sorry, we're trying to change the. Yeah, we are all multitasking, speakers and movers. That's fine. All right. So I haven't introduced them yet, but they are here in front. Movers, resource persons, experts. So yes, thank you. For this second part of this spotlight, we have invited Ms. Ronilda Ko. She's the program lead, localization from the Asian Disaster Preparedness Center, and Ms. Hijin Lee. She's the climate change specialist of ADB, working in the region of Southeast Asia. So, as I've mentioned in this second part, we'll try to dig in more on basically requesting them to share their experience, insights on these areas of supporting MSMEs in terms of providing enabling environments, strengthening partnerships to allow them to or strengthen their climate resilience. So we heard from Fiji their proposed solutions of shortening the response time in terms of supporting communities, MSMEs from 14 days to now 72 hours. From Lao, from the Ministry of Trade and Industry, we heard their experience, the policy and legal framework to promote MSMEs in their country, and Pisagro's role being a convener of these smallholder farmers to allow them or give them opportunity to access resources. Um, I'll request Miss Ronnie and Miss Jean, Hijin. Sorry, I'm Filipino. I'm used to saying Miss. So we heard, as I've said, we heard from Pisagro the role of having a strategic partnerships to as a catalyst for shaping financial landscapes, enabling broader access to sustainable resources, working with the smallholder farmers. But I'd like to check with you. What are the features that enables this locally led partnerships between public institutions, private sector actors, MSMEs, and communities? We've seen very good examples from Pisagro, but how do you think, what are the features that enable these locally led partnerships to flourish?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Sugar. Um, let me underscore the answer in terms of your adjective effective. Effective partnership. So I think what brings effective partnership are those that actually bring scale. That's why you're together, right? So anything that brings scale. Okay. And we already know this, I guess at this point, right? We've been talking about, for instance, cooperatives, women-led, associations. We have a sense that they actually bring scale because they are aggregators, right? And so in terms of MSMEs, you can have chambers of commerce, for instance. Okay? Alliances of businesses do bring scale. Okay? The second point I'd like to bring of what effective partnership, what enables it is, okay? Secondly is the ability to institutionalize the partnership, okay? The partnership has to be anchored somewhere in institutional or national systems. Otherwise, they become coordinating, bodies after projects, they go away, it does not sustain itself. And I'll give an example. For us in the Asian Disaster Preparedness Center, we have what we call an Asian Preparedness Partnership. It's a multi-stakeholder partnership bringing together government and DMOs, mostly the private sector, mostly chambers of commerce, and the networks of civil society. What we did and are still doing now for some countries, Laos is the first to institutionalize itself as a partnership, not as individuals, within the humanitarian coordination system of the country. A policy came out on that, fleshing out what that means in terms of, joint, standard operations protocols in driving, together multi-stakeholder preparedness, response, and recovery is something that you need to flesh out. Nonetheless, okay, having brought that into a national system, it accounts also the partners how, for instance, the Lao National Chambers of Commerce and Industry have actually now developed a disaster management committee within its, within the chamber itself, and has actually assigned, down the line, the MSMEs, the roles that they will play across those thematic, DRRM areas. So that's one. Also, the civil society networks have been driven to do that just the same, to gather all its civil society networks to kind of, define their roles. So it's embedding the partnership itself. The second one is the second one in terms of institutionalization is, what are you embedding as a partnership? So it's not only the partnership you're embedding or anchoring in a national system. What is it that you come together for, that you need to embed? And that is then defining what's the value add of a partnership versus doing things together apart from each other. And that needs a lot of thinking, because not all the things that you do together might actually be something that you want to carry on in the embedding, in the anchoring. So the question is, what are you anchoring? Where are you anchoring it on? All right? And that actually leads us to the third in terms of clarity of roles. Clarity of roles of what you bring to your own networks down, clarity of roles of what you bring actually as a partnership. And lastly, is decentralized decision making. There must be coherence among the partners. One might actually be having, for instance, government has local units and decentralized decision making, but you're probably your network of civil society, national is the one deciding and not down the line. And then you have actually misaligned, communication, coordination. That has actually to be looked into. I'll stop from there so I can give to Heijin.
Jean, maybe you can share more.
I mean, she just listed so many.
Exactly.
So, but I think to sort of synthesize what what was shared is the leveraging what already exists. So don't create some new partnership. And actually seeing what in different stakeholders groups. So whether it's Chamber of Commerce or national banks, financial intermediaries, digital infrastructure services providers, the farmer groups, to and so on, and sort of understanding what their existing structures, roles, and responsibilities, and how they'll be incentivized to partner. I think that's something partnerships often miss out is, you only really work together well if your incentives are really well aligned. And I think it was said earlier in our upstairs as well as down here is shifting the mindset from a beneficiary to a customer. I think that was said upstairs, but also enabling a agent of change, and a business partner, et cetera, et cetera. I think that will allow partnerships to sort of be more aligned and structured to secure success down the futures. But I won't say any more because I think she already kindly covered it all.
Thanks, Jean. Thanks, Ms. Ronnie. So I think what struck me with Ms. Ronnie explained is, why do we partner? Because being alone, it doesn't go us anywhere. Partnering brings scale, allows us to access resources. So I think that's really important. And to institutionalize, because otherwise, if it's just their partnership, but we don't institutionalize, then it affects sustainability. And as you said, Jean, the incentives. Why are we bringing these people? To create more incentives, to provide more opportunities for them. So I'll move on to the second question, because as we also know, developing countries, in many developing countries, MSMEs with their small-scale transaction, they have very limited understanding of climate risks, how they integrate climate and disaster risk information within their operations, how this risk impacts their revenue, their business operations, and how do they put planning and decision making, anchoring into this climate and disaster risk information. I'll ask Jean first. So, how can climate and disaster information be better integrated into enterprise support and financing systems? And how do we make sure that the communities are well informed, that this information reaches vertically from the national, regional, local, at the community? And maybe we can also cover across sectors, horizontal. So I would like to check your insights on that, Jin.
The question on how does climate risk information, um, reach communities and also be explained and utilized in a way that serves and all of their, um, you know, uh, incentive. Well, it hits it's well aligned with the incentive. So for example, for a financial institution, let's say Bank of Laos, that's a central bank, but the MSME funds. For fund managers, the climate change, climate risk information would be most relevant to their years if they're explained in terms of percentage of in terms of the negative impacts that a 1 out of 100-year floods would take place in certain provinces, and then how that translates to the risk, how that translates as a risk to their portfolio. Or if it was for a sari-sari store owner in small island local government units in the Philippines, it might be that if a storm or if the floods were happen, how many days they might be cut off from the supplies, or the internet may be disconnected so that they may not even have access to financial services that is provided digitally, or how many days they might need to be relocating to emergency locations. So I think, and then for government, let's say the Ministry of Trade and Industry, it's actually and Ministry of Finance, it's also seeing how many MSMEs will be impacted, how long they'll be out. And I think we've experienced this during COVID through frequent surveys and checking in with the chambers of commerce or cooperatives, what kind of impacts these businesses are felt. And that so all this information on climate change to disaster risk management and resilience has to be explained in a way that actually is made most sense to the people, to the audience. So I think it's nobody's job. It's actually I think comes out of a conversation. So the climate risk scientists or development partners or science ministry department or Ministry of Agriculture and Environment, Department of Water Resources, they may be able to explain water modeling, but if that doesn't make sense to other government stakeholders, then they're the ones who can say, but can you explain what that means to this province? And what do you mean that there will be more droughts? We have this is the agricultural basket of our country, and I think I hope that having many more of the conversations is how the stakeholders embedded in that conversation can actually say, okay, if I'm a climate change scientist, maybe this is how I need to explain, or maybe what they need is more contextualized information so that they can tell me how this might impact the work that I'm doing. And I think that conversations are possibly better structured more organically. But I think we as development partners have also a role to maybe share examples of how some of these informations are shared. And I think the examples of the Fiji program, I think that probably came out of the information that we actually need to be helped within 72 hours rather than and 2 weeks. And I think those are things that are happening. I think it would be really interesting to see how we can have those conversations more frequently, and the insights gained from those conversations to be translated into different products, different knowledge products, and different knowledge sharing tools, and I think that's how it can be elevated to expand the reach of really interesting information to be practical and to be applicable for solutions.
Thanks, Jean. Ms. Ronnie?
Yeah. Let me parcel out, or unpack your question in the three areas. One is your climate and disaster risk data or information. And I would like to say that I don't think like to have a lack of climate risk data. You have so many modelings, analytics, from national, hydromet to regional, global organizations and all that, right? So I don't think that the problem is a climate information problem. I would like to believe that there is a translation and delivery problem here. Okay. Why? Because as Nida of the Gates Foundation said a while ago, right? Farmers do not actually, talk in or understand or are concerned about climate, climate risk. But they do understand the language of productivity and all that. And when when you have that language, they then come to adaptation. So it's meeting where people really are, And so for MSMEs, decisions are not based on climate risk projections, far from it. But climate risk, like the farmers that Nida said, becomes real to them, when it affects them at what point in their lives. When they're talking now of cash flow, right? That's their language. When they have loan approvals, right? When you are now talking of insurance premiums and supply chain agreements or contracts. So that's where they are, okay? And so what we see is a parallel, events of financing here and climate, climate risk adaptations here, and the integration for me, can happen in experience dealing with chambers of commerce. Okay, is actually embedding the climate risk, information and data where financing decisions of MSMEs are. And that means that for banks, it means, you are to integrate localized hazards, climate risks, for instance, in appraisal tools, when they're lending, credits. And it means that if an MSME, for instance, is in a high risk, right? So what resilience options can you provide as a service, right, as advisories? What, for instance, are the insurance options? When they want to, for instance, retrofit, are there incentives for retrofitting that you could actually provide them? Can you help them access adaptation, finance, right? So these are the things that you can actually, the banks or financing institutions can do. They could also actually, and this has been talked, many times, link concessional, investments to adaptation measures. They can actually also help, commercial banks to actually have resilience-linked portfolios, all that, right? So this is where you actually enter into integration of risk, okay? And now, the other one is translating the language into a business language, right? Risk assessment into business language. This again, I have looked at also Ms. Senkeyo's, PowerPoint, and I think you have actually said there, and I quote, climate data need to be translated into tangible impacts, right? And Jean here has also underscored that. But also you added and site-specific resilience, actions. So it's not the impacts because, it's like what can you do with the impacts? When are you changing? It's not a 1 in 50-year flood. That doesn't translate anything to them, right? It's not an intensity of rainfall, by 20% and all that. Those climate, language assessments. It's about when do they change, planting cycles, production cycles. Are there warehouses, their storage houses? Do they need to be elevated, right? With all the impacts that you have. So when do they actually diversify their supply chain? So this is where you're coming in, talking at the language of the MSMEs, and chambers can actually aggregate that kind of demand. All right. The third thing is actually on the delivery channels. And this is where chambers, all this, trusted intermediaries, somebody has called it like that, aggregators I would call, because they are actually nearer to communities, right? But it's also the use of language, early warning systems, for instance, in local languages, right? And this one, in my experience, this one, right? There's so many, like, climate risk, modules separate from, business entrepreneurship modules, and the trainings are just separate, right? You have to do, integrate climate risk modules into business entrepreneurship modules, and also that these climate risk, right, assessments are then actually talked about, or advisories are provided at the time of the touch points. Okay, where you are actually engaging the MSMEs, and where are those in loan applications, during trainings on entrepreneurship and all that. So you don't actually kind of get them away from the time and and then they probably would not understand that I have this experience. Really, when we were doing this, this DRR, and the chambers of commerce were like, are we like, is this a new thing for us? Is this something that, so it's like, okay, okay, now this is, so you know where to enhance, right? From experience. So this is it. And of course, what enables that integration, it would be good to have actually, agreements with government on public-private, data sharing, agreements, open access to data, all this. So I think I'll stop from there, Sugar.
Thanks, Ms. Ronnie and Jean. So as I've heard from you, so we need to use information that is actually practical and that could translate on how MSMEs are using it. So rather than using those technical terms, use more on how can these impacts affect their production, their profit. So linking this risk information in finance decision making. And I think, Jin, you've mentioned about this use of tools, knowledge sharing platforms to help stakeholders be informed on what's happening. What are the technologies out there? What are the tools out there that can be helpful? All right. My third question, I think, given from the reflections or presentations from ministries, I think you've also mentioned it already. So, in your sharing, but let's just try to capture it more. What do you think would be sorry, the roles? Maybe you can just briefly explain specific roles. As you said, the Chamber of Commerce being an aggregator, the national banks providing financing, the ministries providing the legal frameworks, policy support. Any additional items to that?
So in terms of roles of various I guess components of a business enabling environment, to me, I think the Ministry of Trade and Industry, along with Ministry of Finance and the central bank, have the mandates to, make it easy to start business, make it easy to have expand the access to finance for people who want to run a business. I think, and these are the lawmakers who set regulations on what it requires for somebody to go get a permit to do business, or what are the standards that these products have to meet to be able to be sold in markets. So I think that's very clear for the government to have that clear legal and regulatory mandate, but with the focus on making it easy to do business, and I think that's something that is across the developing countries and more advanced economies. I think the financial institutions, to me, there are two groups. One is a national bank, often, or development banks within the country, where they have their mandate is broader than a typical commercial financial institutions, which is more profit-driven, for-profit institutions. For national banks, I think they can provide access to finance for customers that are often left out by the 100% commercially driven institutions. So in a way, they are often the ones that are chosen to run MSME funds, like in the case of Lao PDR, or the central bank in Fiji is involved in providing a specific specialized products, like the one that we heard from, that would target specific segments of the business ecosystem so for them to be prosperous and also resilient in this environment. And I think that in the third bucket is the chambers of commerce, farmer cooperatives, intermediaries, business incubators, etc., that are able to channel the experiences of individual business owners and entrepreneurs, and then be the aggregative voice to the government, to the banks, because these are typically run by professionals who run stakeholder consultations, participated in regulatory hearings. I mean, individual farmers and businessmen and women don't have time to do that. So I think there's for sure the power that such intermediaries have, and I think we heard from the Indonesia, Peace Agro that does that work in a really powerful and an elevated way. And I think to me, those three buckets, the government and financial institutions and the intermediaries, that sort of, and the most important part, of course, is the actual entrepreneurs, farmers, cooperatives that are part of that sort of the overarching ecosystem. I mean, if one doesn't function well, the rest cannot go far. So I think it's equally important to highlight that while the roles are very clear, it's also important that they're well connected, and each other's roles and responsibilities and the needs, when they're well understood, and that informs the so-called solutions. I think that's when private sector participation and investment really takes place and benefits many of the stakeholders that are part of it.
Thanks, Jean. Ms. Rani?
I just want to add underscore for each of those stakeholders. I think for national banks, what's important is actually to integrate climate resilience into its financing systems. That be appraisals of loans, that be funding windows, that be enabling commercial banks for resilient linked portfolios, all that, right? So that's for me, that's important for national banks. The other one is, of course, the chambers as aggregators. We said that, but it's also that chambers are not are not for networking events, right? They are supposed to provide sector-specific guidance, on climate risk, because they do understand. They're very, they do understand the needs of their MSMEs. They know who's actually underinsured. They know who's supply dependent, and all. They know the state of their MSMEs, right? So that guidance is supposed to be there. Now so I'll not go further for chambers, but also for for ministries. I had 7 years working in the ministry in the Philippines way back as a decision maker myself. I like Senkeo when you presented all the policies in government, right? But in my experience as well as government official way back then, it's not just policies. How do policies align with data? Data is moving and policies are not, aligned with the data, as well as, of course, financing. Financing is, like repeating what is, fiscal year PPAs, programs, projects, for the next year and all that, right? They're not aligning. So it's aligning also that for ministries. They have the ability, they have the authority, they have the authority to do that. So I think those roles, for me are very important when you want to actually drive climate resilience, yes, and financing for that matter.
Thanks, Miss Ronnie and Jean. So at this point, I'll step back a little. We're now moving towards how do we scale up support to MSMEs. As given, you've explained the critical role for each actor, government, chambers of commerce, national banks. But as I've said, I'll step back a little. We know that as we've been highlighting, MSMEs forms the local economy, and they are highly vulnerable, but at the same time, they create innovations, deliver services, and products that could improve community resilience. However, they are largely informal. I see that I did a quick research. 60% of these MSMEs are informal. They are not um, protected, or they have very rely mostly on informal financing, and they don't see incentives of moving from being informal to informal because, as we all know, they work in a very local specific, in a local area specific where their niche is, and they don't see incentives of transferring to formal due to lack of incentives, as I mentioned, of new market opportunities. But how do we scale up that the support, the financing, if this informal MSMEs do not see incentives from moving from informal to formal? And how do we protect them? How will they reach or access these resources?
So that's a really tough question. How to get informal economy to be formalized? Because why would anybody want to pay tax, right? Or why would anybody have to be, have somebody come and check on your businesses to see if they're safe or they're clean, etc. I mean, it can be seen as undue burden if I'm just fine running my shop or running my online shop, for example, or running my businesses in a very small scale. I think one way to encourage formalization, moving this informal economy to more formal economy, is to have both types of financing. So some informal sectors will never be formalized because of the lack of incentives. So I think financial products or social protection services have to remain to serve some of these very poor, very informal parts of economy. But some segments of them can really scale up their businesses and actually grow. And for that, you need seed financing and growth capital, etc. And that may mean that they actually need to go and borrow from a bank. If you try to borrow from a online lender, the interest rate can be really, really high. And I think microfinancing is one of those ideas where you could quickly access to it, but to pay back can be really big. If an entrepreneur really had a good idea and they want to grow, then they can possibly go to, I think, maybe Land Bank in the Philippines or MSME funds in the Lao, and they may provide an interest rate a little bit smaller than a typical, I won't call them loan sharks, but less financial products that are designed for targeting for firms that are not formalized. So you can sort of drive some of these firms or entrepreneurs with the growth potential and mindset to go into formalized, because these banks will not give it extend a loan to you unless you have a business licenses, registration number, etc. And two, you can sweeten the deal by having the kinds of advice that can come with, oh, I see that your loan application is for to have a working capital to build a storage unit for your coffee products for cooperatives. But what we're hearing in our team is that some of these areas are really flood prone. So have you consider integrating design elements to make your storage facility a bit more resilient? And if it's explained in the right way, the entrepreneur might think of the financial product provider to be, actually, person is actually my business partner. They're thinking that, in order to build a storage unit, they're telling me that, these are the ways that possibly would help my storage facility and therefore my business to be more resilient. And they're doing this as a part of my request to working capital. And I think in that story, it can sort of hit many spots that we're thinking about here, right? How to bring, and I think it depends again, the entrepreneurship and growth mindset of the person who is seeking to grow businesses through better working capital, and see these climate information to be a way to boost their business rather than something they should be really worried about. And I think that is to say, I think it really still, I think I cannot emphasize enough that adaptive social protection measures and some of the financial products that are specialized for very informal sectors needs to be in place and scaled up in parallel to some of these access to capital for seed capital or whatever for through MSME funds or through specialized development banks are critical, because again, I think not everybody will go and register to become formal. And that again, I think goes back to the scene setting statistics that DDGs and KO mentioned and you mentioned and others, that the backbone of these economies in the countries that we support and live are through micro and small enterprises. I'm not talking about medium. Medium is like less than 5% in most places. And for them, both services are absolutely critical.
Thanks. That is really good here, providing differentiated support to formal and informal MS or yeah MS micro and small. Yeah, because actually for every country they have different. I mean, varying definition. It might be not that far from each other, but yes, different countries adopt a slightly different definition of this MSMEs. Miss Ronnie, would you add some more before we
Yes.
move to the next?
I will take it from the point of view of climate financing scaling, the question in that sense. We have all been doing climate financing, pilot projects, right? We have so many pilots and all that. I think we do not have a lack of all these pilots, right? I think at this point in time, my take on the matter is what we lack are actually systems to scale that climate financing. It's not the pilot projects. It's the system to scale it up. And so I will repeat myself for what I think underscores scale, right? So it's in each country, right, if we are able to really influence, like, change the regulatory financing systems, right, then climate financing becomes, a core economic policy, right? It's not a here and there kind of a project. So I think that needs really, for me, that needs really underscoring. And then, of course, the aggregation, all that, right? The other one is, of course, aligning public investments with private risk. You have to align to be able to support, private sector for that matter. So these three things. So I am not sure I'm putting a challenge also to to the ADBS colleagues in the development work that we have been doing for decades. Because I think ADB's role in this, if I may humbly, say, is you actually can drive that shift. You can, because you can align, um, you can actually drive the alignment of credit lines and guarantees for countries to actually move towards regulatory reforms, right, in the financing sector. So I think ADB is well positioned, into this. And so, this the CRPP has been with, all the aggregators at the communities and all that, and that has value really. And the question for that is inclusion and this participation, community leadership, and we can move to that to kind of strengthen those questions coming from civil society itself, right? But the other hand now is like it will not scale with all project, just project by project. We scale also by, building rule per rule, regulation per regulation that actually encompasses financing within countries for that matter. So I think we can work towards that, and also, of course, chambers. There are a number of us working with chambers, and we can also work, with you on this matter. But you are well positioned for this actually. So, thank you so much.
Thanks, Ms. Ronnie. I think Jin
Yeah.
has additional.
I think it's really, it's a call for action, and I take it seriously as a part of ADB, not on behalf of ADB. But I think I need to really shout out the partners and supporters of ADB's adaptation program. And I'd like to point out to, John, representing UK FCDO's continuous and really dedicated support, and challenging us to be innovative, challenging us to be collecting evidence and use that evidence to inform our work. To our colleagues like from GCF, that we, a lot of the work that we do has been funded and advised through our development partners. ADF also has been a tremendous, partner as co-financiers, et cetera, and just like the GCF and UK FCDO. And let me share that it's not that they just provide funding and expect let us know what's expected and hold us accountable. It's actually the types of financing and types of support they have agreed with us to apply, and I think it's our ability to provide technical assistance to inform the project design, and then and that is then leveraged to bring co-financing, both in forms of grants and concessional sources. And I think this is something that I shared with John before. John's fund, has one of the TA funds that we received from one of the UK funds was used as TA to inform the design of the SASSP project in Laos. And then EU provided co-financing in several millions. The CRPP came in to provide more co-financing, and it's a really nice story of, I think, what I mentioned earlier yesterday. Like, it really makes us actually feel like a family, And I think it's a story that we can go back, that hopefully John can go back to his taxpayers, that this pound was actually used really wisely to expand mobilization of other development partners co-financing as well as ADB's own sources, right? And in other operation in the Philippines, our policy-based loan to set all these regulatory setting to strengthen enabling environment for private sector to climate action is co-financed by AFD, and some of the technical assistance that goes to the regulatory reforms are done in partnership with UNDP, ADFD, and so on. So to me, I think, we all work well together. I think when we actually put ourselves to the highest standards possible, I think that's when we actually will deliver more impacts and actually be more responsive and more agile to I won't say beneficiaries anymore, the agents of change that we really work to support. And for that, I want to just say thank you so much for the trust our development partners and that have given to us. And I think we can say that this kinds of dialogues that we get to have as a result of the support is a further call for collaboration and more focus, impact focused work that we should do going forward. So thank you.
Yes, thanks, Jean, for closing the loop. Of course, the role of development partners we cannot take into out of the scene. From the national, local, community level, of course, development partners play a strategic role in ensuring that these investments, this support, are being implemented on a pilot or on a large scale investments. So at this point, I'll kindly request our speakers from the first part if you can also join us here in the stage. So let's see if there are any burning questions from our audience. Mr. Insan, Ma'am, and Miss Nanise. I think we've discussed a lot, and I'm not sure if there are any other pending questions from our audience. Sure. If you can introduce yourself briefly and say your question.
So I'm Nidish Srinivas from the Gates Foundation, and thank you so much. And I really liked the practical discussion because it was very real and grounded in how business is actually running. So I had a question related to that, two actually. The first is that the burden of proof. So when you say the finance has to be linked to climate practices that the company will follow, the MSME will follow, how are you expecting the company to deliver proof that they have done it so that they get concessional rates, etc.? And so who bears that cost? And the second is the transition cost, because you mentioned that they need to be trained, they need to understand, and then they need to adopt those practices. But none of this comes free. There is a cost attached to it. So how are you seeing who will bear the burden of this transition?
Thank you. I'd like to check who would want to respond. Jean? Yeah, okay.
Use the SASSP project because this two things. One is to how to ensure that the results, outputs, outcome, and impact out of our freshly designed project would actually produce climate impacts in terms of strength and resilience of the farmers that have been able to access finance through this program, and also how we cost it out to ensure that this types of what we're calling more climate responsive access to finance program will be able to be successfully implemented, because it's going to require uplifting and upskilling of everybody involved. So that's a really great question. Thank you so much. One is that our project includes technical assistance as well as some of the grant components focus on technical capacity development. So it will include better knowledge sharing to training the people who are involved in explaining this new product to going and actually getting acquiring customers, etc. So those details I maybe I'll ask DTG to share, and also so that is the answer to the second question. I think the first question is the very easy answer is that our results indicators include those climate metrics, gender metrics, etc. But on the ground, and I think it's, while it may sound like an easy question, but they really do drive the action. For example, if you have applied for CRPP funding, you better make sure that it's reported and is implemented according to what was proposed in the CRPP. So our country management team has requested our wonderful colleague Jay Ganesh, who's in this room, I saw him somewhere, to actually spend more time to support implementation of SASSP project to our the adaptive social protection project in Lao PDR. And typically the climate team members support processing of the project, designing of the projects. They don't often remain in as a team member to implement the project. But in our case, we are providing dedicated human resources to ensure these results metrics on climate, on gender, on inclusiveness is actually met, and then they work in partnership with more a agriculture specialist to access to finance specialists as a whole 1ADB team. And I think that is the way we're trying to ensure that results are, we have a laser focus on the results, and that the project is designed to include capacity building of all parties involved to ensure that we don't ignore the actual costs of elevating everybody's skills and knowledge. Maybe DDG Sankeo can share a bit more about that capacity building components.
Yeah, I would like to add more for the capacity building as Jean, Jean, yes, sorry. Jean mentioned that we not just provide like a financing for them, but we will provide the technical assistance, but not just only for the MSME or the household. We will provide the technical assistance to the PFI or participant financial institution on the, we can say, value chain to the, especially for the credit staff, how to know to evaluate on the proposal or something like that. So this is a very good project that we design, but let's see on our implementation because it's in the first stage to prepare to implementing the project. Yeah.
Thanks for that. We can accommodate 1 to 2 more questions, or else we.
Thanks very much, Sugar. Hello, everyone. My name is Julie Amoroso Garbin, and I'm from the UNFCCC Regional Collaboration Center for Asia and the Pacific. Thank you very much for the presentations earlier and also the discussion. It's also very insightful. One of the things that I caught up is the mention in terms of the linkages to the national adaptation plans, and that was mentioned by Fiji's presentation, and I think briefly also by Indonesia. And you talked about reporting as well, Hee-Jin, and I think from the way you were talking about it, there's a very clear result framework of the CRPP project, right, in terms of how it achieves adaptation objectives, etc. So my question would be, clearly it links to implementation of the national adaptation plans, but how do you capture reporting in such a way that it feeds back to the national government, who is, the main sort of aggregator of the results of NAP implementation? And now that, and I know this will complicate another layer, is the global goal on adaptation has already been adopted in Belém in the last COP, and this will also sort of, has to be clearly articulated when countries submit their reporting on the implementation of NAP. So that to me is, I mean, I would be very interested to understand how this feedback into the national mechanism, because clearly we know adaptation, when it comes to implementation, is very local in context. But again, in terms of, you know, feeding it back to the global process, I think it's very important to capture this, because there are nuances that are clearly you know, responding to the global process. Thank you.
I'm not sure if Jin, would you want, or maybe you can also mention the
I didn't want to
support.
hog the microphone, but it's like I'm in a karaoke and I'm not letting you go. I think it's a really important and it's a very interesting question. I am a regional focal for Southeast Asia at ADB, and I look at my main job is to work with the regional management team as well as country directors and country operations head to ensure that ADB's work is embeds climate throughout all across sectors and all across our financing instruments, including lending and technical assistance. And one of the biggest, and then in doing so, work we work really on pipeline development for ADB, and for that, the critical factor of success is to link environment ministers with financing ministers and then planning ministers too. To me, the reason why is because National Adaptation Plan, nationally determined contributions have all been led by the environment ministries and with contribution from financing ministries. But in order to translate National Adaptation Plan into investments, you have to have finance ministries and planning ministries and line ministries all to be involved. And so one of the work that we do is climate adaptation investment plan, planning TA, and there we are actually trying to bridge the gap between these two ministries that often don't work well, not that they don't work closely together. Sorry, didn't say well. I didn't mean that. Please, thankfully our colleague from BG stopped recording. So to me, I think perhaps while we have encouraged the government to report on NDC and NAB implementation, I don't think ADB, at least from Southeast Asia regional team, hasn't made that specific links between the types of TA that we support and then linking that to the national reporting. So, you know, the answer will be unsatisfactory, but I think you'll look at that and then see how the Department of Environment or Department of Climate Change collect information and see if we can find out how we can perhaps strengthen it more so that these local adaptation efforts or the efforts that may be outside of the purview of the Department of Climate Environment Ministries would be captured in the reporting, even as a text box, if it's not, you know, nicely fitting into the quantitative and qualitative monitoring reports.
Yeah. Also, just to add, it's a bit early to announce, but I think we're doing that way. We are currently developing a concept that could help countries translate the global goal and adaptation indicators at the national level, where we can link this to the national development outcomes. So we will be working on a selected countries to pilot that, and hopefully can be replicated to other developing member countries. So there's a initiative towards that to link, as mentioned by Jean. Currently, we are doing this CAPE, Climate Adaptation Investment Planning Program, where we are trying to identify priority investments on key sectors in selected, actually 13 countries. We're currently working on 13 countries. And from these investments, how these indicators, how these metrics are aligned with the national development outcomes and linking it up with the global goal and adaptation indicators. Yeah, we're trying to push that initiative this year and hopefully for implementation towards the end of this year and up to the next year. Okay, one more question if okay. Or I see two hands. Let's see if we can still accommodate.
Thank you. I'll be very quick. So I'm Sabi from UKF CDO. So my question is very much tied to the question the colleague here mentioned earlier, and it's specifically targeted to Insan from Agri-Foods. So you, in one of the slides you presented, I think you talked about quite a lot of data and results around resilience, growth, sustainability, and whatnot, right? So I just like from your experience, how resource intensive is it to collect data like that? And two, and how do you use those data for the line of work that you work in? Thank you.
Insan?
Response to that, yes, it is very resource intensive, um, time consuming, because we use hundreds of indicators, criteria as well. And because our members of companies are different in size and in core businesses as well, not all of these criteria and indicators can be filled the same. So numbers can be interpreted differently, and because we are multi commodities, even each and every commodities would give us some different perspectives as well in terms of like, from the growth, access of finance. Maybe for palm oil it's high, but for corn it's probably low. But because we are putting aggregate and average numbers, so that's why. I mean, we could talk further, but I could provide more detailed per commodities and per like growth, resilience, or sustainability data on it. But yes, it is intensive. The second one is, so we're using these data dashboard for report back essentially. First is to the governments that this is what private sectors are doing, transforming its supply chain, working with farmer, helping increase the livelihood of farmer, including women. Second is for the investors, banking, banks and whatnot. So yeah, I hope that answers. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I think this is the last question before we head for lunch.
Thank you. My name is Kiet Keson from Lao PDR Ministry of Health, and thank you very much for the very inside discussions and very practical in some extent. But I just would like to have, for example, a colleague from Fiji. Could you elaborate more? This is very good practices and lesson learned. How this context, and especially you and the team, how do you increase accountability, ownership and leadership of the local authorities? We have learned from some contexts, working with line ministry or multi-sectoral collaboration is particularly difficult because they want to work on their own priorities. But the mandate that we are going to work together is pay less attention on that. So how would you transfer this knowledge and roll out more to others location in your countries? How do you provide this local knowledge? How this knowledge being heard by the high level official for climate resilient adaptation policies? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Well, in Fiji, we have a structure, a very well developed structure. It's already been implemented, and for local communities, when they, coming back to your question, when we try to scale up to the national development plan, like what I actually put out, there is a structure there that certain communities follow. So they can't just do whatever they feel like. There are certain procedures to follow, and the line ministries that they have to liaise with in order to achieve that certain goal or mission that they are trying to accomplish. I hope that answers your question.
All right, thanks. With that, I think we've come to the end of our session. We had a very productive discussion, sharing of insights, and we learned more from our speakers from the country perspective, Pisagro, ADPC, and from ADB. And yes, sorry, we have. There's another. I was informed that there's another meeting that will come after this. So I won't say much or try to summarize, but I think the message is clear. Enabling environment and partnerships are critical to scale up support to our MSMEs in further strengthening their climate resilience, especially at the community level. Lunch will be at the same area. Let's all be back by 1:45 at the ballroom. Am I correct? 1:45, right?